Welcome to the conversation part of the podcast. We have recurring guests of the program. He is our college football guy. He's also the best music guy on Substack. You can follow him at Musings on Music. You can follow his digital work at Fox 4 in Dallas, Texas. I'd like to welcome back to the podcast Carter Freemon. Carter, how we doing? And I can say the air is almost crisp, but it's still humid down here in South Florida. How are you doing, by the way?
Finished, did a 3-mile run this morning. Had to do it a little earlier in the morning because otherwise here in Dallas, it will be 105, 106 in a couple hours. But no matter the heat, the smell is in the air.
Mm-hmm.
I know that the smell is in the air because you've had me back on for the first time in 8 months.
Yes.
College football is almost back. My purpose in life is finally back. I'm happy that the season is nearly upon us.
I definitely agree. I can only do so much, listen to so much recruiting talk or week 0 recruiting talk. Who's the next QB or so much camp talk. I'm just ready to put the pads on. You're hitting somebody else. It's not your teammate anyway. So that's what I like to say. Mm-hmm. And we're finally almost.
I mean, look, we've had yet another offseason of transfers, another offseason of legal drama, which seems to define the sport now almost as much as the games on the field. You've had a gambling suspension overturned and then overturned to the point where that player's not going to be in the sport this season. And yeah, there's many headaches, not to mention the LSU Jaden Daniels stuff I know we're going to talk about.
Yep.
The headaches are almost over. The sport is almost back. It's funny, 9 months out of the year, college football sucks because the headlines are so annoying. Mm-hmm. But those 3 months that the games are being played, it's like, oh my God, I am in heaven.
Can we say 4 months at least? Because we get into late January now, like early February almost.
Yeah, the sport continues to shoot itself in the foot with its scheduling, and it is somewhat nice to have it go on longer. But just you get it going head to head with the NFL, which the NFL is always going to win in a ratings battle. Mm-hmm. So, and I don't, right now it's fine because it's months away, but we're all going to complain come January when the quarterfinals are played and then the semifinals are played a week later. And then the actual national championship game is almost 2 weeks after that. The scheduling is still bunked, but again, the games will be played and that will make people forgive a lot of that.
Definitely. I'll say this. I do enjoy those the quarterfinal games or the semifinal games on a weekend, like a weekday night, like a Thursday and a Friday night. It was perfect this year because I was producing the Miami Ole Miss game. I didn't get home till maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, but I was able to enjoy the Indiana Oregon game at a bar on a Friday night at least, which I say you can't beat, by the way.
And you had, with Miami too, you might have had to stay up late to produce those games, but I feel like it wasn't the worst thing in the world to have that many more games to produce, right? I saw Miami beat Ohio State here in North Texas at the Cotton Bowl and, watched some of that firsthand. So yes, you had to stay up a little late, but more games, more success. And then, it is fun to have these games kind of at a little irregular times, and it's holiday adjacent enough that you might not be working as hard, at least earlier in the year as you would maybe at other times. So a lot of the world's tuned in, and it's odd because we're still getting used to this new playoff format and everything, and when it happens. But once again, the games themselves, A+.
It's always A+. I enjoyed that Miami run. I think I had so much fun because it looked okay. The A&M game was that was fun. Then I got asked what's your New Year's plans? I have no New Year's plans. I was expecting to work anyways. I was telling that to my boss anyway. So I was I'll work the Canes game, no problem. Then I was people, I was you're good. I was I'm good. Don't worry. I'm here to the end anyways. I never had so much fun. The only time I hated it was the next day I had to do Miami, Florida State in college basketball when I was dead tired. But I'll say this. I enjoyed that. That was the most fun college football run. I have no affiliation with Miami. I produced the games, but I enjoyed the run they had anyways.
And you're definitely going to gear up for another one this year.
Yes.
Miami doesn't have the start to the year that they did last year with Notre Dame, right off the bat. That game is still going to happen. It's just going to be, I think, in November is when they play in South Bend. So Notre Dame will obviously be looking for some revenge there. But
definitely
getting Darian Mensah, bringing in, some defensive players in the portal, that's going to be the biggest thing for Miami in my eyes. I believe they opened at number 7 in the AP poll that just came out yesterday. Uh, I think Darian Mensah will be an upgrade from Carson Beck, even as experienced as Carson Beck was. He obviously had his limitations as he's throwing ducks out there at like 5 miles an hour, and somehow they're still all those passes are getting completed. But Darian Mensah is a better athlete, but losing Ruben Bain Jr., losing
Akeem
all the other
Mesidor.
defensive players that you had that powered that run, Akeem Mesidor, guys like that, that's going to be the big change. But I don't know, man. Mario Cristobal, for as much as we dog on him, and sometimes rightfully so, he finally put together that run that everyone expected. And I think you'll get more to the point where like both Miami and funnily enough, A&M, the team they beat to start that run, I look at him and Elko in kind of the same way where they're like, okay, they've had this talk for a long time, but they finally took that next step. Now the floor is raised. Let's see if they can keep that floor raised.
Are you guys enjoying, like, you're in Texas anyways, North Texas, you're an OU guy. Do you like how Miami's coming back to its power?
Like I do. I think the sport's better when all of the, historically good teams are good. That's not to say that a new team like Indiana can't come in and have that success and still be, still the sport can be really fun. But there is, loving the history of the sport and having watched it for as long as I have, like I know the history of Miami when it was Catholics versus convicts for them in Notre Dame in the 80s. And, even the early 2000s, last time they won a title. Like, I think it's more fun when those teams are good because then it's easier to hate those teams because so much about college is about it's the love of your team and the dislike of everyone else. And so when those other teams are good, it's easier, like the anger and the rage you get, just the throwing mud at those teams, it comes back. And I think to a certain degree, right? Like obviously fans will take it too far very easily, but I think it's more fun when a team like Miami is good or a team like Nebraska is good or, begrudgingly when Texas is good, because then it means more when OU beats them, which they haven't done in 2 years, but still, I think it's better when like the traditional powers of the sport are good, and Miami definitely falls into that.
It feels like it's been needed anyways. Like you can always have Notre Dame, like you have Alabama. It's like that's like the South, but like Miami always feels like a national brand. But when you see Michael Irvin on the sidelines, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, that whole alumni, like when you have like, for example, we during the Fiesta Bowl we had, or the Cotton Bowl, we had like Ed Reed on the sideline doing a sideline interview. Like that was the coolest thing of all time. I was looking at like you probably will never get that like and anywhere, like maybe USC or Texas OU, but you get that immediately. It's like, hey, Ray Lewis, do you want to come on like Miami Hurricanes pregame, like during the network pregame? Like that to me was like, man, this is a brand that's like super strong, anyways.
Yeah, and I mean the ACC is again, it's pretty. It looks right now like it's going to be a one horse race. It's going to be if if they can stay out of their own way, because by and large they're the best team in the conference, and there are other like solid teams in the ACC, but the depth of the conference is not what it was, not what it has been in the past, and even like your Clemson's that have dominated the ACC for 15 years. Well, this is the first year that Clemson hasn't been ranked in the preseason AP poll since Osama bin Laden was alive in like 2011, right?
That's like crazy.
Obama was in his first term. Like it's been a long time since Clemson hasn't been ranked in this poll, had some preseason expectations. And you also have SMU is ranked in the AP poll. You also have like Virginia. I think people expect them to still be solid. I guess your perennial wild card is Florida State. They play in week 0 this year. Can they rebound from yet another just horrendously disappointing season like they had last year? I don't know, but the ACC is 100% going to be Miami. It's going to be if Miami can stay out of their own way, because for a while last year they did, and then all of a sudden they didn't. I think they kind of got gifted that final playoff spot and made the committee look smart by including them versus Notre Dame. But still, like Miami is by and large the best team in that conference, but they have to. They can't lose those games to like SMU like they lost last year. Like,
or Louisville.
You're not going to have quite the margin for error, I think, now that you did then.
Yeah, I think the one team we forget about is Louisville, which is like who's always a sneaky dark horse. They could be they come out anywhere. That's like the one team is like, don't forget Louisville. Like that's one game I always circle on the calendar because that Louisville plays Miami tough no matter what. Anyways, so doesn't matter if there's defense or no defense at least.
Jeff Brom has built a really solid little program there. And I mean, they made the ACC title game. They've made more ACC title games than Miami has, and Miami's in the ACC. And yet,
they've been in once my whole entire life.
Yeah. And it's funny, stats like that with the sport. But Miami, I still expect them to be good. I don't know, where they'll end up slotting in with the kind of some of the teams around them in the AP poll, like Indiana defending national champs right in front of them, Texas, Georgia, Oregon, Ohio State, Notre Dame. They're all in front of them right now, but I feel like they came in the right spot. And just on the subject of the AP poll, the preseason AP poll, I feel like they did a pretty solid job on the whole. There's nothing on there where I'm like, that is like egregiously dumb. Like one team in the preseason top 10 always ends up unranked. To my mind, that's going to be Ole Miss. They're number 9.
I was about to say that. Like, Ole Miss is my big one over here.
And maybe it's easy because they're one of the lower ranked teams and they're, not as well regarded as some of the teams at the top. But the teams at the top, I'll expect them to stay pretty good. But Ole Miss loses so much of their offensive line and so many players from their team that went to the semifinal last year, transferred to LSU, followed Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge, that's one thing. You can reload in the portal and get good players elsewhere. That's how Lane Kiffin built a lot of his teams in Oxford. But the coaching staff that stayed with Ole Miss during their playoff run last year, a lot of them are now at LSU. So it was pretty phenomenal watching Trinidad Chambliss and what he did and Kawan Lacey and DeJon Stribling, all those offensive players that they had that empowered them to they were a Hail Mary away from going to the national championship game in that game against Miami in the Fiesta Bowl. But so much of that team and the coaching staff is not there anymore. And I think they really helped they all of what Lane Kiffin had built after he left, they helped that stay along for that run. Now that that's not there, I don't know who Pete Golding is as a head coach.
That's me too, yeah. I just don't know what he is. What's his plan?
And the brilliance of Trinidad Chambliss kept Ole Miss going through much of last year, but they have a deep, deep SEC schedule, as every team in the conference does. Without everything they had last year, are they going to have the same horses that can go in and nearly beat Georgia in Athens, that can beat Oklahoma on the road? And, they have LSU in week 3. LSU is another team that I'm kind of iffy on. I don't know about the year one, and just the way that LSU works, they're either the best team in the sport or they're the most embarrassing team in the sport. And I think more often than not, they're going to be more embarrassing, especially in this year one of this whole Lane Kiffin experiment. So, but Ole Miss and LSU play at the Grove in week 3. So I'm a little hesitant to look at Ole Miss and say they're going to be a top 5 SEC team yet again. If they are, I think it would be team number 5.
I'm with you on Ole Miss. I don't know what to expect. I was shocked that Trinidad Chambliss is playing again. Honestly, like the judge favored him. I thought he would at least go to the NFL draft. He's probably one of the best quarterbacks right now in that next year's draft. When you look at it, next to Darian Minson, if Archer Manning leaves, anyways, when you look at it, I
think he will. I would be surprised if Arch stays. Arch would have to suffer a major injury and not play, or if Texas has a losing record, then I think he would come back. But given their expectations and the way that Texas is loaded up in the portal, for as much money as they're spending on this roster, this has to be his final year, because they have to have the expectations and the, what you saw at the end of 2025 to carry into 2026. This has to be the year for him. Because if they disappoint this year, who knows what the Texas fans are, they're attached at the hip to Arch at this point. I don't know what he would have to do to alienate himself like previous players at the school did, but I think I would be surprised if Arch came back for another year after this. I know he could, but this has got to be for Texas. This has to be the year that Sark is building towards. I know they made 2 semifinals in the playoff twice, and won 2 playoff games a couple of years ago, but that was the year where they beat the number 12 team and the number 11 team in the playoff. This is the year that they have to go up against the big boys. They have to beat Ohio State in week 2. and then they have to go on the road to Tennessee and win. They have to go. I know they play LSU this year. I don't know if it's on the road or at home, but like they got to start, doing what they think they can do against the bigger name teams in the SEC, the more talented teams that they haven't done in their first 2 years, which is lose to Georgia 3 times, which is, go on the road and lose to a bad Florida team that keeps you out of the playoff. Like if Texas
that should have been fired, Sark should have been fired for that game at least. Like losing the.
I won't go that far, but because it's Texas, the expectations are always sky high, and I think what people think of the team always gets blown out of proportion. And I think this year, and that happened last year when they got ranked number 1 to begin the year. This year they're number 5. Now, talent-wise, they might have the most talented roster in the sport. I think Oregon and maybe Ohio State have a little bit of bone to pick with that, but like Texas by and large has to be, this has to be their year with everything they've spent, all the players they brought back beyond just Arch. I mean, Colin Simmons and some of their linebackers, some of their cornerbacks. Like this has to be the year that Texas actually puts it together and is back and goes to a national title game. Like those are the expectations.
Their big road games this year is at Tennessee, at LSU, by the way.
Okay,
and,
so they
do
at
A&M to end the season on a Friday night, by the way.
Yeah, that's the day after Thanksgiving.
After
the little Lone Star Showdown. So
Lone Star Showdown. I will say this:
the neutral site game in Dallas with OU as well. I mean, that's not a road game, but it's not a home game either.
Yes, that's a classic 12 high noon 11 a.m. game for us East Coasters and you guys. It's probably my favorite thing to do is to be on my couch and watch Texas Oklahoma play. Not at 3:30. I'll say that for sure.
I agree. It should not be at 3:30, but the SEC really likes it at that time slot for some reason. But
for sure,
the 11 a.m. kick is where it's meant to be. But that's okay. I mean, this year, hopefully OU scores a touchdown against them. That would be an improvement over the last 2 years. So
I will say this for you guys. At least you guys put a fight, made the playoffs. Because there's some expectations, but everyone had expectations for Texas to make the playoffs, and they didn't even make the playoffs anyways. So
yeah,
that's
that's another. We talk about the offseason, all the headaches and whatnot. That's so annoying to me that Texas is canceling some of their out of conference series because they like their home and homes like Notre Dame that they have coming up or whatever. Like because they lost to Ohio State, they decided, oh well, we shouldn't schedule out of conference games because an extra loss will keep us out of the playoff. Well, yes, technically correct, but iron sharpens iron, right? Like look at last year. I know Ohio State and Michigan were not quite of the same tier, but Michigan was still a 9-win team last year.
Yeah.
OU beat Michigan. They beat their out of conference team and they end up going to the playoff. They also won their tough SEC road games, I should say, when they beat Tennessee and they beat Alabama. Texas lost to a bad SEC team on the road in Florida, and they lost to Georgia. So, yeah, like there are things beyond just losing your out-of-conference game to a tough opponent. They kept them out of the playoff, but the laser focus on that one thing, I think, makes the sport worse because we talk about all these teams, these classic, historically good programs being good. You want to see the best teams play each other.
Yeah.
And in this day and age of the playoff, losing a game like that does not kill your season. Losing to a bad team like Florida kills your season. So that's the thing that irks me is they're floating canceling all these games because they want to beat Texas State to get an extra win. Like that is how the Big Ten has gone about things. But the top teams in the Big Ten go in and whoop every other team in the Big Ten. The thing about the SEC is it's extremely deep. There are more solid teams throughout the SEC than there are in the Big Ten, sure, but that's also what Texas signed up for. That's what Oklahoma signed up for when they left the Big 12, where they were the premier marquee schools in those conferences. And when you're Oklahoma, you won that conference 6 times in a row in the last decade. You left that. Like this is the fight you chose that should not exempt you from wanting to play tough games to prove that yes, we are actually one of the best teams in the country. Going and beating up Texas State and UTSA and Sam Houston State does not show me anything, especially like Texas last year when they struggled against those teams after they lost to Ohio State and Arch was still finding his footing. So the bottom line is if you want to prove you're as good as Ohio State, if you want to prove you're as good as Oregon or Alabama or whoever, you should play those teams.
Looking at you, Florida, you should be playing Miami every year, anyways. Let's be honest here. And Notre Dame should be playing Miami.
I mean, they do play Florida State every year, but
yeah,
it's just funny. The Florida teams have always fascinated me because the three Power Four, like classic Power Four Florida teams, Florida State, Miami, they're either, much like LSU, they're either the best team in the country by a wide margin, or they are a dumpster fire. Like there is no in between and all three of the schools, and often they're really, really good at the same time. That was like the entire 1990s. It was either Miami was the best team, or Florida and Florida State were, duking it out for who's going to win the national title.
Yeah, it was perfect anyways. It was like you had quality storylines, and you had players that hate each other and teams that hate each other. It just sucks that Florida doesn't play Miami every year anyways. So that's why like a lot of Miami fans have respect for Florida. So at least they keep this on the schedule, at least when you think about it. So that's a big thing. All right. What's the bigger story? The Texas Tech QB getting dismissed for gambling, or the Jaden Daniels storyline versus LSU, by the way?
It's definitely the Brendan Sorsby and Texas Tech stuff, because from an outsider perspective, and look, I went to OU, so we were in the same conference with Texas Tech for a long time.
I think that's why I like you, because you're not a Texas Tech apologist anyways.
I try not to. I'm only an OU apologist. That's the only one that I will make a ton of excuses for.
Which we like, by the way.
The thing with Sorsby is, the disgusting thing to me was the way Texas Tech went about defending it. Was defending the cardinal sin. It's like the one thing you can't do in the sport is gamble on it, period. And especially you can't gamble on your own team repeatedly, like Brendan Sorsby did while he was on the team in games he played in. That should be the simplest no-no of anything in the sport. Absolutely 100%. And Tech originally, in their statement, it was like, oh, we're concerned for, Sorsby's health, like mental health. We're supporting him all the way, while also working to try and get him a preliminary injunction to play on the field, because Texas Tech got this taste of success last year and they didn't want to give it up.
Exactly.
And the way that they latched onto this Sorsby stuff and tried to make everybody else the villain was abhorrent.
It's such a West Texas thing anyways. When you think about it,
you're dealing with a kid here who you claim has an actual mental health problem that needs to be fixed, but we also need to win games on the field. So that can be secondary to the fact that, well, he needs to play with the team. And the way that Cody Campbell, Kirby Hocutt, the Texas Tech AD, Joey McGuire, all Texas Tech leadership defended it and basically brainwashed all of the Texas Tech fans into thinking that that was okay, and that it's the world is against them that's wrong, is just disgusting. I think that is so wrong. I think it is so simple. I worked a betting show for 3 years. I have seen what betting can do to people when they are addicted to it. And from reading everything about Sorsby, he had a gambling addiction because he was sending money when he lived in Texas to people in states where gambling was legal so they could place bets for him. That is a legit problem. That kid should not be anywhere near a football field. And the way that the Texas Tech leadership defended it for as long as they could, until finally the court of public opinion convinced them that they can't, do this charade anymore, it was so wrong. And I am glad that Sorsby's not playing this year, because he never should have. The whole thing should have been immediately like, okay, like
out.
This is death penalty. Like you're out. But I'm glad that, God forbid, imagine that kid after everything that transpired this summer playing on the field, on the road. And if his mental health is as bad as people think it already is, him going on the road and hearing everything he was going to hear from opposing fans, that would have been like just mental terrorism on him.
Oh my God.
So it's a good thing that he's not playing. The Jaden Daniels thing is just a lot funnier because I don't know where this Jaden Daniels is like speed running the RG3 path with like having this amazing season in his, winning the Heisman his last year in college, having this amazing season. And then
like, when's my number getting retired? Like, when's this going to happen?
Yeah. And I guess Daniels played 2 seasons. He came back in 24, but just the way that he had this amazing, first year in the NFL, and then immediately got hurt, and then is
Mm-hmm.
having all these off the field issues. It's like the RG3 starter pack. Everything he's doing is like the same thing RG3 did in Washington, but it's like, dude, you're not Joe Burrow.
No.
You didn't win a national championship. And to make this such a public thing during training camp for him after he had such a bad sophomore season when he was hurt so much is like,
Mm-hmm.
this is embarrassing. And it goes back to the LSU is, they're either the best team in the country or they're a absolute train wreck. And this goes into that whole train wreck thing.
Oh yeah. Do we think Sam Levitt's going to be the guy could get LSU out of the doldrums of what they were the past couple of years, or no?
I don't know. I mean, so much of I think Sam Levitt was built on the players around him, and he'll have really good talent with him at LSU, but he really became this forgotten man at Arizona State after, leading Arizona State nearly to winning the Peach Bowl the year before. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because Arizona State, they lost 4 games and they just didn't have the same success that they had the previous year. I think Jordan Tyson, his really good receiver, really helped him. I think Cam Scattaboo, the previous year at Arizona State, really helped him, and he didn't have that last year. So, sure, give him some better talent around him. I think things will be better than they were at Arizona State, but I don't know if he's the difference maker that people make him out to be. I think Arizona State had that really magical run, and I think he can be a good quarterback, but not a great quarterback.
Plus, you want to see what he can do outside of Kenny Dillingham is the main question too. So that's a big thing as well.
Look, Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. are really good offensive minds, so that's a good spot for him to go as far as like learning an offense. But I don't know. I'm not as bullish on LSU as I think some other people are.
I'm not sold on LSU. Like, wake me up when they play like Florida or one of the big games and stuff. That's what I go by anyways this year for LSU. It's like, wake me up at least. All right, we didn't talk about much of the champs. Indiana. Can they are the defending champs. They are usually a basketball school. Now we're talking about football for them. And we've always said this to about every team that's won the national time. Can they repeat?
I mean, well, look, we said no team could go 16-0 in this new playoff format. And then of all schools to do it, Indiana goes 16-0. So, I mean, I think literally nothing would surprise me at this point in the sport. And just pulling their schedule up really quick, they'll have a little bit more of their schedule was not a world beater last year.
No.
But what they did is they went in and they destroyed everyone on their schedule. And then when they played better teams like Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, and then Miami, they beat them all. So I feel like the sky's the limit for Indiana, just especially even after winning a national title. Like, they're still Indiana. Like, I don't know what it would take for us to like not marvel at the fact that they, of all schools, have turned into a powerhouse. But this year, they do have a pretty tough back-to-back in October.
Yeah, their October schedule is nuts, by the way.
They have Ohio State at home the week after they go to Nebraska, which Nebraska, I think, is going to be really mediocre again because that's just what that program's become, but that's never an easy place to play.
No.
Then they have Ohio State at home.
At Michigan.
Ohio State, #1 team in the preseason. And then they go to the Big House and play Michigan. And then, Minnesota and USC after that, and even at Washington. Like, they have tougher games this year than I think they did last year. So, Josh Hoover coming from TCU to replace Fernando Mendoza, I think it's a solid replacement, but Josh Hoover had a lot of turnover problems at TCU. It's a reason why people were high on TCU, but TCU never, with him as their starter, took the next step and became a Big 12 contender. So the other thing too is the Indiana teams of the last 2 years had a lot of James Madison transfers that came with Curt Cignetti to Bloomington, and they grew with them. They grew into obviously a national championship team. A lot of them are not on the team anymore, and Fernando Mendoza is not there anymore. So I think Indiana will still be good. I think people disrespect Indiana because they're Indiana and they don't have the UT logo on their helmet. They don't have the Ohio State logo on their helmet or the Alabama logo on their helmet. But I do think they'll still be very good. I do think Curt Cignetti is probably still the best coach in the sport. It's hard to deny that when Indiana's lost 2 games in the last 2 years,
which is crazy.
They went 11-2 and 16-0, so he's 27-2 in his first 2 years at Indiana. So pretty easy to say he's still the best coach in the sport. So I do think Indiana will still be good, but look, Michigan should be a little better this year with Kyle Whittingham coming in.
Do you
He'll be a
like that
better head
hire?
coach than Sharon Moore. I do. I think Kyle Whittingham always did a lot with a little when he was at Utah, and I was always a big fan of those Utah teams. And give Bryce Underwood at quarterback. He's started for a year. I think Michigan will be better. I think Ohio State is still Ohio State. I think Oregon's the best team in the country. I think they're probably the most complete team in the country. I mean, Dante Moore, I don't know why we're not talking about him, no pun intended, more. But Dante Moore probably could have been a top 3 pick in the draft last year, and he came back. And Oregon is much like Ohio State and Alabama is a factor when it comes to talent. I think they're, like I said earlier, one of the most, if not the most talented teams in the country. So, and Indiana doesn't play them in the regular season, but Indiana also beat them twice last year on the road and in the Peach Bowl.
Yeah.
So, but the Big Ten at the top is getting a little better than it was last year when it was really just Indiana, Ohio State,
and everybody
Ohio
else.
State, and everybody else, and Oregon. But Indiana beat them both. So I do think Indiana will still be good, but the Big Ten is going to be a little more interesting top to bottom than I believe it was last year.
Are you interested in Penn State since they got Matt Campbell from Iowa State?
I'm done with Penn State. I don't
Good
talk
answer.
To me about Penn State anymore. I picked him to win the national championship. But no, I picked him to go all the way to the national championship last year and lose. And they fired their coach before November. And the other team I picked to go to the national championship and win it last year, LSU, they also fired their head coach before November. So
you're 2 for 2 right now. So you're on a heater.
2 for 2, 0 for 2, however you want to look at it. But the Penn State thing, they've always been one of those teams where I was like, all right, this is the year, this is the year, this is the year. They've disappointed me enough to the point where I'm like, if they do good, great. But it's them and it's North Carolina State are 2, and Texas Tech before they got all this money and became a bit more of a traditionally good team like they are now. They've always been one of those teams that I pick to be good, and they never are. So I'm out on Penn State. I do like the Matt Campbell hire. They went through a really roundabout way to get there, because when they fired James Franklin, I'm like, that should have been the guy from the get-go. You can go back to when I was on Fan University last year at 105.3 The Fan, and I was like, that's the guy they should go after. Like he had run his course at Iowa State, and he's like Kyle Whittingham, where he's done a lot with a little. And for whatever reason, Penn State had to fall ass backwards into hiring the guy they should have gone after in the first place. But they got him, and I think he'll do good things there. And I don't think they'll be the dumpster fire they were last year, but they're not going to compete with the top teams in the Big Ten like from the get-go. No. At least I don't think they will. And I mean, if I pull their schedule up really quick, they play USC at home, and USC's it's been 3 years of these teams in these new conferences, and I'm still like, where's
my Pac-12 after dark right now when I get done producing games? Like,
well, we're getting the Pac-12 again, just a much like watered down version of it with Boise State, Colorado State, some of the other
like those
old
teams should have
West
been
teams are
like those teams should have been in like 10 years ago when they do the expansion. Anyways, like get Colorado State in, we're looking at everybody else for real.
Penn State has a relatively favorable Big Ten schedule. They do play USC at home, and they do play Michigan on the road, but Washington on the road will be another tough game for them. But Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue, Northwestern, Wisconsin, they do play some of the teams last year that did not have it all put together. So I don't know. I really don't think they're going to be a playoff team this year. But it's not going to be hard to be better than they were last year when they were just such a disappointment.
Speaking of James Franklin, what are your thoughts when he took the Virginia Tech job, by the way?
I mean, for Virginia Tech, I think that's a really good hire. I think that's like James Franklin may never win you a national championship, but Virginia Tech has always been in one of those like right below the blue bloods, and they're aspiring to push their way up. And for most of my adult lifetime, they have not been that. Their floor has been really low. So James Franklin, if he's going to do anything, he's going to recruit the DMV area really well, because all those players from Virginia that were really good would always go to Penn State. So now that he's at Virginia Tech, those good players in Virginia will stay in Virginia, right? They'll go to Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. And then just, I think in general, like Virginia Tech, if not this year, their floor will be so elevated that they will be generally more in contention for ACC championships and maybe playoff berths through that in a way they haven't been for a long time. And the Virginia Tech, I feel like they're always talked about as like a dark horse. And then by week 3, it's like, no, they're just the same disappointment that they've been for quite a while now. But I do think he'll elevate the floor. The ceiling, I don't know how high that's going to be. We saw it at Penn State, where arguably you have more resources. Mm-hmm. But if he can get Virginia Tech anywhere close to what Penn State was for about a decade, the ACC is not nearly as challenging at the top as the Big Ten is. So I don't know. I think Virginia Tech will be better in the long run. Maybe not in this first year, but I do like that hire. I do think that is good for Virginia Tech to establish a better baseline than what they've had for, like I said, most of my adult lifetime, the last 15 years.
It's not going to be like Penn State. I think their first or second year after all the scandals, they went to the Rose Bowl and they lost on a field goal. Like they're going to at least Jane Franklin will build Virginia Tech the right way, at least.
I think so. I think he's a solid culture guy, even if he did get Penn State to a college football playoff semifinal 2 years ago. Like we shouldn't forget that he's not that far removed for, nearly beating Notre Dame and going to the national championship. But I don't know if he can do that with Virginia Tech, but I still think they'll be better than they were.
We'll see. I think the bigger question is I saw this. What's your thoughts on North Carolina with Bill Belichick and the whole Michael Lombardi getting thrown out? Are we going to see Bill Belichick get fired in the college football game at least this year?
I don't think he lasts beyond this season. I think even beyond just the Michael Lombardi, the very young girlfriend, everything there, like that team sucked on the field last year.
We hyped that team up way too quickly. I was like, we all believed in one drive anyways.
All right, let's talk about the week 0 slate to go along with North Carolina, because they're our first game of the season, because the most American sport, college football, starts its season overseas for whatever reason in Dublin. But the Dublin game this year in week 0, which is not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday, or you can edit it out if you need, if the timing doesn't work. Saturday, August 29th, our first game, 11 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. or 11 a.m. Central, 12 p.m. Eastern. North Carolina and TCU in Dublin. That return game was supposed to be in Fort Worth this year. I'm kind of annoyed that they moved it, because I would have gone to this game if it was in Fort Worth. Like I went and saw Deion's debut with Colorado a couple years ago. But our first game is going to be, has Bill Belichick and the football team made any actual improvements?
True.
After the dumpster fire that they were last year.
Very
I don't really think they have. I find it hard to believe that the guy who was not a very good NFL head coach with the Patriots for his last couple of years and was a terrible college football head coach last year is going to figure it out after year 2. Because if you want to make the Deion comparison with like the big name head coach going to college, Deion had star players that stuck around after the first year and improved the second year. North Carolina does not have that. Their best defensive player went to Ohio State this past offseason. Like they're not good.
No,
they weren't before Bill Belichick got there, and they're still not. So they're not going to be good. And TCU is still I think they're going to be solid. If a few things go right their way, they'll contend for a Big 12 title, but they're not like this boundary pusher. Now their quarterback, who came from Harvard, very interesting. He might be one of those guys that we look back on at the end of the season. It's like, he kind of came out of nowhere. Well, you heard it here on the Upper Bowl podcast first. I cannot think of his name off the top of my head, but TCU's quarterback played in the Ivy League last year. Very prolific passer. He comes in, replaces Hoover, who left for Indiana. He might be one of those players we look back at the end of the year. And this game we'll get to see it first, but no, I don't have any expectations with Carolina. None at all. I think
Jaden Craig, by the way. Jaden Craig, by the way.
Thank you, Craig. I knew he had 2 first names. I just, is it Craig Jaden or Jaden Craig? Jaden Craig. I think he'll be one of those breakout players at the FBS level this year. But I mean, that first game, TCU North Carolina is going to be, even if it's there will be headlines that come from that game no matter what. But the whole week 0 slate this year, it's usually you get the Dublin game and you get like a bunch of FCS teams playing. But this year, I think there's an interesting game at every time slot for whatever reason. TCU North Carolina to kick the day off.
Yep.
Great. Definitely
USC
be
San
tuned
Jose
in for
State.
that. USC plays in week 0, which USC, this is another one of those teams where, like we talk about Texas, like this is what Sark has been building towards this year at Texas. Like this has to be the year. It feels like this has to be the year for Lincoln Riley at USC too, because they were good last year. They went 9-3 in the regular season. They lost their bowl game, but they bring back Jaden Mayava. They have a 1-2 punch at running back who Lincoln Riley has been saying recently reminds him of Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine when he was at Oklahoma. But last year, you just saw them not compete with teams that were better than them. They lost to Notre Dame. They lost to Oregon. They lost to, it's Illinois on the road, right?
Yeah.
They have been a poor road team since they joined the Big Ten, but this is allegedly the most talented team they've had since Lincoln Riley's been there. So this is also like we get to see that up close and personal right after the North Carolina TCU game. After that, you have Virginia, NC State. NC State, I always have expectations for them. They always fail, but then Virginia's coming up. We should not forget, Virginia did play for an ACC title. They were an overtime win away. And they upset
Florida State too also that year.
Yes. Virginia was a good team last year. They don't have Chandler Morris anymore, but I still think Tony Elliott maybe somehow, some way has turned into a bit of an underrated head coach at Virginia. So that's an interesting game. That one was supposed to be in Brazil.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a game in Brazil. They nixed that, so now it is a non-ACC standings game between two ACC teams at an ACC stadium. It's a really weird sentence to say, but that is what this game is. Then you've got North Dakota State, Jacksonville State. North Dakota State, the perennial FCS powerhouse, is now an FBS team. They're in the Mountain West now. So what do? They had one of their best teams ever last year at the FCS level, lost a shocker in the first round of the FCS playoffs, and now they're an FBS team. So are they going to be as good when they're playing against better competition? We'll get to see that to start the season off. Sacramento State, another team that jumped from the FCS to the FBS. Sacramento State in California is now in the MAC, the Mid-American Conference, because once again, nothing makes sense anymore, but they play at Eastern Michigan. One of the group of 6 contenders, Hawaii, who I think is going to be one of those teams contending for that group of 6 playoff spot, they play at Stanford, who they beat last year, and Stanford has just been not very good for quite some time now. This is the return game in that series. It's at Stanford. Who knows what Stanford's going to be this year? They've got Andrew Luck's old backup quarterback as their new head coach. So I don't know there. So Hawaii, that's going to be a fun thing to watch. Talk about Florida State. They play in week 0. Are they going to be a dumpster fire again? Who knows?
Do you think they're going to fire him? Do you think Florida State's going to fire their head coach finally?
If they go 5-7 again, yes, they will. And then they'll give someone else unqualified a whole lot of money. And then 3 years down the road, they'll be in the same boat. But then Memphis and UNLV, those are 2 more teams. That's the final game in week 0. Those are 2 more teams that could be in contention for this group of 6 playoff spots. So I think there's a lot more intrigue in week 0 than there has been in years past. And that's a good thing because week 1 week 1 has good games. Yeah. It does not have the marquee matchups that we had in
last year,
say 2025, when week 1 you had Texas, Ohio State to kick the season off. Then you had Alabama, Florida State, and then you had Clemson, LSU. We do get LSU and Clemson again this year. That's the biggest matchup of week 1. But a lot of the bigger out of conference matchups are week 2 or week 3, because week 2, that's when Ohio State goes to Texas and Oklahoma goes to Michigan, which is a game I will be at. So I'll have to come back on and give you the whole big house, rundown after I get to go to my first game there.
There we go. We'll take that. Anyways, I'll pencil. I'll put you in the marker in. So Carter Freemon after OU Michigan. You're on the board already. So
sometime in September, you'll have to have me back on.
Definitely. My big thing is Florida State. I think the name that you should probably look out for, if Brian Hartline does really well at USF, I would not be surprised if Florida State goes down to Tampa and try and get Brian Hartline to come to Florida State, by the way.
That could be a pretty easy pipeline. And because UCF does not have that person right now.
USF.
Scott Frost. Right. Just talking about the other teams in the state of Florida, it could have been in like with USF this year, it was our guy who went to Auburn, whose name I'm blanking on right now, but he was one of those really pipeline to like Florida, because USF beat Florida last year, and it was like, oh, he could just go up to Florida. Like USF, they've become that pipeline coach school for some of the other programs in the state, because like FAU, FSU, or
Alex Golish.
Alex Galesh, thank you. I don't know why I could not think of his name. Yes, because he came from the Josh Heupel Tennessee system. So, but yeah, Hartline obviously he's great at recruiting wide receivers. Proved that when he's at Ohio State. We'll see him as a head coach. That is probably one of those more low key hires that we're not talking about a lot, but could be. USF pumps a lot of money into that program. They really want to be one of the best of the group of five, and I saw them beat UNT here in North Texas last year, and just watching them, lines of scrimmage with North Texas, they looked like close to a Power 4 school, like size wise. And you could tell they spent a lot of money in beefing up their trenches. So they spend the money to be good. And if Brian Hartline can be, anything close to what Alex Galesh was, then he could find himself at a bigger job pretty soon.
Definitely, for sure. I think I look at week 1. It's an all right schedule. I'll say that for sure.
Look, college football's back, so I'm not going to complain about it. But it does not quite have a lot of these sexy matchups, at least on Saturday, that years past have. Like on Thursday, we get Colorado at Georgia Tech, which I think is, Georgia Tech obviously had a really good run last year, and they end up losing a couple games at the end of the season, and they don't make the ACC title game. But they lost Buster Faulkner, their offensive coordinator, but Brent Key, their head coach, is still there. So, who knows what could happen there. Your Miami Hurricanes play Stanford. So Stanford plays week 0 and week 1. They must have a bye in week 2 or week 3 or something
9
like that.
9 o'clock start for the East Coasters over here anyways. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
At least it's not 10:30. At least it's not 10:30 like the Cal game was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, but you've got, Boise State at Oregon. Boise State is perennially given Oregon fits. They nearly beat him with Ashton Genty a couple of years ago. Oregon is, again, supposed to be one of the best teams in the country. Baylor and Auburn, they played last year. Auburn won on the road in Waco. This year they're going to play in Atlanta. This is going to be a neutral site game, which sucks. This game should be at Jordan-Hare, but for whatever reason, they can make more money if it's a neutral site game, so whatever.
I don't get it.
Look, the rest of the slate is not quite as enticing, but still, look, college football's back, and we're going to sit around all day and watch it and just soak it up. What more do you want?
You can't. Uber drivers will be making their money on Uber Eats and everything else anyways and go to the bars. So.